Welcome to Therapy for Nerds, the show where licensed mental health professionals use their favorite topics like TV, books, games, and movies to provide psychoeducation on mental health. Please note, this is not meant to be a replacement for mental health treatment or services. Hi, and welcome to Therapy for Nerds. I am Cassidy Russell, along with a guest today, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm really good. I'm really excited for their conversation today.
Me too. I had to go back and rewatch all of Fruits Basket, which I didn't actually rewatch. I had never actually watched the remake because the remake is a lot closer to the manga, which is a manga that I in high school really enjoyed. So it was kind of nice revisiting something from basically my childhood and looking at all of the trauma the characters went through, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
Anyways, do you want to start off with Toru?
Yeah.
Or do you want to start off with
So
saying a little bit about yourself?
both, I guess. So I am technically still a doctoral student. So I'm studying clinical psychologist. I have a master's degree and I'm working, doing therapy and assessments right now. But need to finish that pesky dissertation. So as soon as that's done, then I can move on with my life and have a life. Um, and for that, so and I also do like psychology for geeks is sort of like the brand that I'm trying to get started to help promote that, including or using geek culture in the therapeutic section. I mean sessions, and that's kind of how we got connected, right? Which is
Yeah.
great. That and social media.
Yeah,
Um,
Instagram. I love your Instagram page.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had actually like written a blog about this, sort of to briefly explain some of the trauma that we see in the show. And for Toru, who's like the main character, the one that sort of like stuck out to me the most was just grief, right? 'Cause she lost her mother, but also when she was really young. Like in anime, it's really hard to tell like how old like the kids actually are, because sometimes
So
the
true.
way they dress or the way that like the sizes between like kids and the adults is like really weird. So like I'm not exactly sure how old she was, but she was tiny when her dad passed away, and
Mhm.
there didn't really seem to be any other family or like significant family connections until the mom passed away. And
Mhm.
by that time she was what, like 14 or so, 15
Yeah, I
maybe.
want to say 15 because I
Mhm.
think basically she's like a what it would be considered a sophomore in high school in like American terms. So like yeah, 14, 15-ish.
Yeah, and then so we kind of were like before we started recording, like we were talking about like some of the things that were like really weird in the anime. But like one thing that was really weird were like the grandpa was like, "Can you just find a friend to stay with while like the house is being renovated?" And then I'm like, you're just gonna like completely abandon your 15-year-old granddaughter and be like, "Good luck. Hope you find somewhere to stay." And like he didn't even check
Yeah,
whether or not
no.
she actually was staying with someone or like meet the parents or anything. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. And then she gets in trouble by the extended family who called some like private investigator to check in on her and is like, "Oh, you're living with unmarried men. How could you?" And it's like, well, if you wanted to protect her from that kind of stuff, maybe you should have, I don't know, let her live with you. Like that could have solved that problem. That didn't have to be a problem.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it was it's a lot of I don't know if it's like a cultural thing or just something that happens in anime and manga, but that is quite common for adults to blame children and or like just, teens and be like, "Well, you should have known better." And I'm like, "Well, how? How could they have known better? They didn't have anybody, an adult. They're teenagers. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like
With
you were a
their
teenager once, right?"
Yeah, with their underdeveloped brains, like they're supposed to be more mature and have more solutions than the adults in the room.
Yeah,
Uh,
and just know things. Yeah.
yeah, and especially a kid who just lost her main support. Like her mother is shown to be her main support throughout the show, and she constantly refers to her mother, even though she's such a like a happy, uplifting character. And I don't know if you felt this, but like I found myself sometimes forgetting that the mom died. Like it has to be like within a week of the show starting, basically.
Oh my God, that's so true. Okay, so I thought, yeah, because there was like the fight, and then like the grandpa won that fight, I guess, for her custody, but then immediately was like, well, you can come live with me, but not now. Like, go find somewhere to live in the meantime. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like it happened really, really fast. So like, because like in my notes, I kind of wrote down that she didn't have time to process this grief.
Mhm.
Um, and she really didn't. She was just like focused on survival. And then later she was focused on helping everyone else because, and I think there is one point where she does say that she wants to help everyone else because then she doesn't have to think about herself. She doesn't have to think about what she wants or what her future is going to be like or what her past was like because then she's so focused on something else.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, well, yes, we often do that. When something really bad happens, we just want to focus on something else. We don't want to think about it. So forget it. So like it doesn't get addressed. You don't think about it. You don't allow yourself to experience any of those emotions. And then, a few years later, or like months later, or sometimes even weeks, like it
Mhm.
comes back and it's like, where's this coming from? Like, remember that time you ignored everything and didn't want to do, like, you don't want to think about these things like that.
Yeah, and it often happens when there's like a lull period, right? Like you've accomplished the thing that you've been trying to accomplish so that you don't have to think about whatever it is that you don't want to think about, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
she only starts to really process the death of her mother after she's kind of broken down some of the barriers of the Soma family and like started to get in like into their hearts and into their trauma and really helped them. It's only then that she kind of breaks down a little bit because she starts to work through her actual trauma. And even then, I think there's a lot more that she could go into. She's so focused on breaking the curse that, and we don't see her after really the curse is broken. There's a lot that she needs to process.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed about like just the anime itself is because there was a lot of reflecting. She was kind of like, oh, wait, what are they thinking? What's really going on for them to act out, or like, why are they saying this? So I really enjoyed that part. And I think it did help a little bit because from what I remembered, it was Kyo, the one that basically forced her to start looking at her own trauma and was like, wait, what about you? Because he didn't want to look at his own. So he's like, no, you look at your own and then we'll talk. And then that's when she started. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe there's like things I also like she also needed to process. Um but like one of the things that I think lately in my blog that I wrote about is that that's all we need, right? Like someone to be there, like at least one person to like be there and support us. And for like basically the entirety of the Soma family, it was Toru. Like she was the one that accepted them regardless. And even I keep thinking, I don't know about you, but like everything that Akito did, I was like, I don't know if I could have been like, hey, you want to be friends? You like traumatized all my friends, but we can still be friends. I'm
No,
like, I
not
don't, I
about
don't
that
know
life.
if I would have.
I could not. I could not. I'm not one of those therapists that believes that you have to mend every bridge. Like some bridges are best left burned. Like you don't have to reconnect with every toxic person that's ever been in your life. And Akito is definitely one of those people where it's like maybe you don't have to spend time with the person that locked you in a room or beat the crap out of you or the person that you loved. Like doesn't seem healthy.
Yeah, sometimes setting that boundary and being like, I can't really hang with you, and that's okay. Like, I forgive you, but we're not gonna be friends, or we're not gonna have any communication after this. It's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, I don't think. But then like thinking back is, so one of the things that I really like about this anime is that each character had sort of like a slightly different experience, and like their personalities were different. But I don't know if you also noticed this, but for Toru, her personality was very almost non-existent. Like she didn't really have a personality other than I'm gonna mother everyone. Like I'm gonna be everyone's mother and be caring all the time. But she didn't really say she liked anything. She was basically, I
Mhm.
feel like she acted kind of like a mirror for everyone, where she was like just reflecting back what, like all the trauma and like negative experience. And she was like, it's fine. Like you can still like look at me and, look
Yeah.
at the mirror, and like you're still like a person and you're worth something. But it almost felt like she didn't really have like a personality, because from the time where from her dad's death, I think somebody said you don't really or what is it, was it that she looked a lot, or like she didn't look like her father?
Yeah, she didn't look like her father, and because
Yeah.
mom had such a bad reputation, I think there was people were probably speculating that it wasn't actually Toru's father, so she decided to adopt his mannerisms.
Yeah, and then I'm like, so from a young age, she's just put on this mask, because that's not like her true self. Like she just started doing that out of like wanting her mom's attention, and
Yeah.
then she just kept it up because everyone sort of praised her for it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and like everything sort of like in her life was like catering to somebody else,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
not like never herself. And even at the very end, the only thing that she did that was like quote unquote like selfish was wanting to stay with Kyo in a relationship. Like that was like the only thing that she did. Well, I guess the other thing was like living with the Somas. Like,
Yeah, and like
but also like that was also like probably survival, because her family they were mean. They were
yeah, like
horrible people to her.
how is that selfish? And it's not like she was living at the Somas and like free for nothing. Like she was actively working. She was their maid. She was their housekeeper. Like she wasn't. How is that selfish? You're basically employed full time as this family's mom. But she
Yeah.
was viewing that as a selfish act, wanting to live with these men and be their surrogate mother.
Y- Yeah, basically, like she worked for her room and board because, like, other than that, they didn't really do much for her.
No,
Like,
because
she was
she,
the one that was like, just taking care of them. Like, she just existed
yeah, well, she
as
even
a
still
plot
had,
point.
she's went to school, still had a part-time job, and then in like the Valentine's Day episode, she comments about how she doesn't have any money, and they realize it's because she used her money to buy them all chocolates.
Yeah.
So like they don't give her any extra money. It's just food and a roof over her head, and then she works for everything else. And she even works for those things too. So it's like, yeah, and Kyo in the anime was like, "Hey, you should be selfish. You should ask for some things." And she never really follows through with that. I
Yeah.
feel like
Now I
the
kind of,
show really praises her for that too.
I don't know much about the Japanese culture, but it just sort of seems like that would be like the ideal woman in some countries or some cultures, where like your responsibility is to be the heart of the home and take care of everyone. And yeah, it's okay to be selfish every now and then, but like you said, like those selfish things are not really selfish things. It's like just normal human things that we all require for survival. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I definitely noticed in the show she doesn't have much of like an outside personality. It's a lot of mirroring because you can even see that in when she has like one-on-one interactions. Like I'm thinking of her interactions with Momiji. She's a little bit more outgoing, like smiling, happy, like Momiji is. When she's with Kyo, she's a little bit more like energetic, like we're gonna do this. Um, with Yuki, she's a little bit more reserved. So yeah, she's definitely a mirror for other characters. And I think that is definitely a survival technique that she adapted from a very young age.
Hmm. Definitely. Hmm. Because that's how she befriended everyone, basically, right? She just was kind of like there, not judging, but not also adding a lot to the relationship, not discussing or not requiring anything from anyone. Like she just, I mean, that's one of the things that they say, like that she has a really hard time asking for help, like any sort of help. Um, and that's how she ends up living in like a tent in the woods.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's such a like anime sort of thing where she's like, yeah, I can do this. I can. And then like I think it was like in the first episode or so where she was like, I'm gonna go wash my face. And I'm like, where? Like was there like a river or
I
a
think there was
pond
like a river or
nearby?
something. Yeah, I think there was a river, she said, like a creek or a river nearby that she was gonna walk to. Um, I think it's also kind of a teenager mentality of just like not really thinking it through, but just doing it because
Yeah.
that's yeah, the thought process I could see one or two of my clients having.
Well, and it's probably like we all had that phase where we were
Oh
like,
yeah.
no, I know better.
Yeah.
And I'm strong enough and like I know stuff and like I'll be able to overcome this by myself. I don't need help.
Mhm.
And that's a lie. We
Oh
all need help.
yes. Yes, we do. Speaking of needing help, I think that's a good transition to Kyo because he is definitely, in my opinion, a character that needed a lot of help from other people, but tried to refuse it. Um, what was your experience? How did you perceive how he dealt with his grief and his trauma?
Well,
Definitely
like
a lot of
pretty
both.
much every character, he didn't really deal with it. He so Toru survived by sort of being everyone's mirror, right? By not judging people and accepting them, just reflecting everything back to them.
Mhm.
Primarily like the good qualities that everyone had. And Kyo survived by building this wall around himself, by like he had this anger in him, and he pushed everyone aside. He said like, no, have already been hurt since he was born, basically. Like, oh, like he had like, I don't know, I felt really bad for him because then I kind of forgot that he also witnessed his mother's suicide. Like she just walked into like, not traffic, but like in front of a train. Like she walked in front of the train, and then she also witnessed Toru's
Mhm.
mom died.
Yeah.
And like immediately after he met her, and then he was holding on to this secret the whole time, and then like he fell in love with her and all these things. But so it was a lot of like restraining his emotions, like not really showing. And whenever he did, his emotions were very, very loud, but
Mhm.
they tended to sort of come across as like very aggressive, very anger focused, right? Like the softer side, like his softer side, he didn't really show it. And when he did, he was like, well, whatever. Like, you want to take this thing that I brought for you? Fine. If not, then I can just throw it away. Like, like it was very much like, I'm gonna help you, but like, but still, like, don't get too close because
Yeah.
I still have this wall. Like, I don't really fully trust people to come too close. And like, the only person that he had was his master, right? His martial artist, like, master.
Mhm.
And he just, I don't know. He had so much because for him it was what was it? He was ostracized by like everyone basically because he
Yeah.
was the cat. Like, the one thing that they didn't really explain, and I was still curious about, is like, why did he transform? Why did he have like a second level of transformation? Why did only the cat have like a monstrous side and not all the other animals?
I I think it I don't really know if they truly explain it. It's just this is how it is. I want to say it's because the cat was an outsider compared to because he was the only one not invited to the banquet. Although, like when you finish the series, there's the whole like what actually happened at the banquet, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it might be because he was the only animal that didn't drink the magic potion willingly, and at the end he said that he didn't want it, and so God punished him for it.
And also, he was like already sick and dying, right? When he was
Yeah.
given the potion or whatever, and everybody else was healthy, I guess. So, okay, I guess. Yeah, still doesn't make sense, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It was just another way of like a F you to the cat, I guess. Um,
yeah.
yeah, when you were talking about his anger, it definitely made me think of like, I don't know if you've seen the anger iceberg thing.
Oh, yeah.
Which for anyone listening or watching, maybe I'll try to find one and put it in the show notes, but or a link to one. It's where anger is like the tip of the iceberg, the part that you see, and then as you go down underwater, it's hiding all of these other emotions, which I think encapsulates Kyo really well because anger is a very safe emotion for him, and he
Hmm.
doesn't feel safe expressing the deep sadness that he has, which he has a very deep, profound sadness.
Yeah, and like just this enormous sense of guilt
Mhm.
because he blames himself for like being born a cat. He blames himself for his mother's suicide, for not saving Toru's mom, for not being good enough to be able to defeat Yuki.
Mhm.
Like, he just blames himself for everything because everyone around him blames him too. Like, and like he couldn't really count on his dad, and his dad spent basically all of his time trying to imprison him or kill him. So that cannot feel great at all.
No.
Um And I think, did he also like, I think it was sort of like hinted at that because of dad's like alcoholism, like he was verbally and physically abusive towards his mother.
Yeah, it was definitely hinted that the dad's physical and like verbal abuse could have contributed to the mother's suicide.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure he witnessed that as well, heard it at least. He was like old enough to remember all of those things. So he basically just turned around, built a wall, and tried to place the blame on someone else. And like that's when we do, like when we feel really guilty about something, we try to find an explanation why we feel guilty. It's not us, it's someone else. It's because my dad told me to do this, or like my dad left us when we were little, or you know, so and so didn't tell me or didn't give me that information, or like my coworker, whatever. Like somebody else needs to be responsible because it's not me, because then if it's me, then that means I'm the problem, there's something wrong with me, like, and it just kind of like spirals downwards from there. And then so his dad probably also had some sort of trauma that led him to pick up this habit of drinking his problem, or trying to drink his problems away, blaming someone else, and then he in turn around and just blame Yuki. Yuki is responsible for this, like it was the mouse, or yeah, um it was because of you, it was not me or the rat, it was the rat's fault. And then so like he centered his whole life around trying to do that, but then it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like the other thing too, I was like, okay, so Kyo spent all his time training. Yuki never trained, yet he was better. And I'm like, I don't know. Like it's one of those like anime things where they're like, oh, well, he was just a genius, and
Yeah.
that's the explanation. But yeah.
They also say that Yuki's like a sickly child, but he still can kick Kyo's butt. Like that's something I didn't quite understand was like how Yuki could be both this sickly child, but then also this amazing prodigy.
Like martial artist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because then he had like, well, he like some problem with his lungs or something. I think is what
They
like
think
how they try to explain it.
yeah, he had asthma or something, and then yeah. So
I
shifting
don't know.
more gears to Yuki because there's a lot of trauma to be shared, and he definitely had his share of trauma. Um, he was an interesting case, definitely a lot more introspective regarding his trauma. What would you say?
Compared to Kyo, for sure, because Kyo was like, I'm not gonna think about this. I'm not. I'm just gonna like try to defeat Yuki, and that's like my whole personality, my whole everything. And for Yuki, for that one's like I guess more explainable because he spent so much time sort of locked in the room by himself,
Yeah, that's true.
so he could do nothing else but think. And Kyo, in some way or another, he was always surrounded by people. Like they were not always nice to him, but so hence the whole building a barrier to push everyone away. But Yuki was kind of forced to suffer in isolation. And
Mhm.
I think the thing that broke my heart the most for him specifically is that every time he tried to reach out, they were like, no, you need to make us look good, and this is for the good of the family, and go hang out with the head of the family or whatever. Like this is your duty. And then like his older brother was like, I have my own problems to deal with. Like I have no time for you. And then so he had no one to turn to
Mhm.
at all. Like except maybe and I'm totally forgetting his name now. The one
Haru?
they're turning to the cow or the
Yeah,
ox.
Haru. Haru.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
He was basically in a sense, I felt like he was the one that started
Mhm.
doing what Toru ended up doing for everyone. He was trying to be the one person, that helped them, but then he couldn't really because he also had his own problems, and he was trying his like very best to like go visit Yuki, and he was responsible for Yuki eventually moving with oh man, names, man. The one that turns into the dog.
Oh man, I'm blanking on his name too.
And it's like really, also like kind of hard for me to pronounce, so like I try not to think about it. But Horu was the one that was sort of like begged, and he was like, I'll do anything if you helped him. um we can probably do like 5 or 6 different
Shigure.
episodes on just
Shigure. Shigure. That's his
Sugar.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was also like a very interesting character because, well, out of all of the characters, he was probably the only one that was somewhat stable, because he was like, yeah, I'm a mean person and I'm gonna lie and cheat and trick everyone in order to get what I want, and that's just who I am. And like, you take me or you take me. Like this is it. Like I'm not gonna change. I'm not ashamed of this. Like this is just who
Yeah.
I am. And
I
like
don't know how
there was,
stable that is, though, to be
well, I guess I'm saying like stable enough where he was like he knew where he stood. Like he's the one that sort of understood himself and where he wanted, and like he tried to do something to get it. But everyone else was kind of like, this is it. Like this is my life now. I can't do anything about it to change. And Sugar was like, no, I am gonna make this better. Like I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna get what I want. I mean, he probably also did like horrible things, and
oh,
there was
horrible
way
thing.
better options available.
Horrible
But
thing.
I mean, in a sense, yeah, he was probably like the one that understood himself, I guess, enough
Yeah.
to.
I don't remember what the fandom was like. Like I because it's been so long. But I wouldn't be surprised if he started off as like a lot of people's favorite character because he's like the funny kind of pervert, but also like he seems like an overall nice guy. Like he lets Toro stay. He doesn't really make any sort of overt moves on her. But and then you get to like halfway through the series and you start to be like, no, this guy's kind of shady. And then you get to the end of the series and you're like,
He was really
oh,
shady the whole time.
this guy's.
Like he was 10 and he was already planning everything. I was like,
Any. If you could remember your girlfriend's birth, you're probably too old for her. Like, if you remember her mom being pregnant, you're too old for her.
I mean, that was one of the several relationships that were probably not as healthy
Yeah.
as, you know. I mean, the one thing that I did, I guess, appreciate about the show is that in some way or another they attempted to, because they we saw like all of their journeys, like how they got started, like what how their trauma got started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of like how they experienced and like the little uh, like how they kind of, it was kind of like spread out, their healing journey was kind of like spread out a little bit, so like, you know, they will get better, they understand a little bit better, or they reached out for help and whatever it was that
Mm-hmm.
that they needed. And all of them had some sort of peace at the end, or made peace with what had happened before. um but it just in some ways it kind of washes it, or like it's very superficial,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure like one of my favorite characters was Momiji, and his story just makes me so sad because from the get-go he was like, I understand why mom is like this, I understand why I have to live like this, don't like it, and I'm gonna do whatever I can so to make sure that they're okay. And then in the end they couldn't even tell the mom, this is your son, but then also he looked exactly like her. And she's all like, here's someone else's kid. And I was like, oh yes, because like a German and Japanese child is very common to be seen around. Like I that looks exactly like you. I don't know. There's like a lot of like little loopholes that I was like, I don't really buy this.
Yeah, they don't show. I do wonder what they did with that after the curse was broken because I don't think they showed him interact with his mom uh before he started telling people that his curse was broken. And so I
Mhm.
wonder if he went back like after, because when he was able to like tell his dad and everyone knew that the curse was broken, I wonder if they went back and like told her the truth and everything, especially because the little sister wanted to have a relationship with him, and that was just
I
so sad.
know. I know. And like so I guess talking about like parenting, because we were like, everyone like needs at least one person to believe in them, right? And for Toru it was his mom, and then his mom's memory, or her mom's memories. Because a lot of the things, like she would just constantly talk about her mother
Mm-hmm.
and like the life lessons that, that she imparted on her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how she kind of, that I guess another way to cope, like remembering her and carrying her picture everywhere she went and talking to her, was kind of how she still felt that connection with her. Kyo had his master, and Yuki eventually, like at the end, he said like, you were like a mother to me, because his mother was not really there. Eventually he like made up with his brother, and then so that helped a lot, I think. And for him it was because he was isolated for most of his like childhood because of Akito.
Mm-hmm.
um Building, just having friends, like real friends, and being able to be himself, that was really helpful for him. And like Momiji had like his dad, even though his dad was like, I'm so sorry you have to go through this, but like this is for everyone's benefit. And it probably was, because then the mom would have just continued to like spiral.
Yeah.
And I mean, Toru also had her friends, but she didn't really rely on them like at all.
Mhm.
And they didn't really know what was really going on with her. Nobody knew actually until like Kyo started. Well, I guess because of their love, he paid more attention to her. So he pointed out the things that he was noticing that
Mhm.
she didn't want anyone to know. But then, like you said, like a part of me, I was like, okay, well, I kind of understand like Akito's perspective because she was told, well, not only was she like raised to be a man since she was little, so she had to hide who she really was,
Mhm.
but she didn't really have an adult that was supportive. Like all the adults that were around her that were supportive were not great role models at all. Like the mom had her own like unresolved grief of her husband dying and
I think
hated her.
excessive,
Hated
like,
very
that was
obsessive, yeah.
excessive, like, that didn't make any sense to me, that character did not make any sense to me.
Like yeah. And then there was Shugure who was like also there, but also his love was expressed in a really weird way, and he was so much older than her. um I don't know, it was really weird. um the only person that was kind of okay was mm, that guy that turned into the rooster. I forgot his name.
I I don't even know if I would agree with that.
Well, like because
Kurano.
if yeah, Kurano, yeah, he well later he realized that he messed up by staying and like
Yeah.
listening to her like childish request to stay, and when he should have like left, and he acted like he just sort of gave up on his life and was like, I'll do whatever it takes and I'll just do whatever it is that you tell me, and that wasn't like necessarily healthy
Mhm.
um
Well,
for either one.
I don't think a child should be considered like the head of the family because it ruins the family dynamics, right? Like there's a reason why children shouldn't be put in charge of everything. Like there's a reason why when you're a parent, you don't just tell your kids like, "Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want," because whatever they want might not be healthy, it might not be safe. And Akito from like an early age was basically told like, "Oh, you're God. You can say and do whatever you want." And the adults around her were very indulgent in any little whim, and everyone was just supposed to roll with it.
Yeah,
Which
it was a very much like a hierarchical kind of thing, because even like the nanny or the lady that like helped her was like, yeah, you're the head of the family, like you are the
Mhm.
chosen one or whatever. And the dad has these really weird ideas of like, you deserve everyone's love and everyone's gonna love you. And I'm like, you can't tell that to a child. And like you said, like you brought it up, like a lot of the times parents also um will say things like, oh, you're the man of the house now, like I'm gonna go on a business trip, or like, it happens a lot with servicemen, active military, where they're like, you help your mother, you do this, and the kid is like 4. And then so like you said, like it breaks the dynamics of the house, because then the kid's like, I'm responsible, I get to do whatever I get to decide. And then the mom's like, no, you don't know. None of that is true. But then
Yeah.
the child feels that sense of responsibility. And a lot of these characters were forced to grow up, and a lot of them didn't really have like a childhood.
Mhm.
Like they didn't really experience what we hope all kids have, the possibility of the opportunity to experience. They just,
Mhm.
and especially Akito, like
Mhm.
she didn't, like, I think she was like already like in her early 20s, like when the show started.
Mhm.
And but from and I don't know when she actually started taking care of like the families, like businesses and stuff. Um, but she was still too young to have been told that you're responsible and you can do whatever, because she had that idea like, I my dad told me I could do whatever I wanted with you guys. So whether it's abusing them or traumatizing them or
Mhm.
having sex with them, it didn't matter. Like she could do whatever she wanted, and like she had no respect for anybody at
None.
all.
Yeah. It was always about what she wanted, what she thought was best for her, even if it wasn't what was best for her. Because I don't think her having sex with grown men when she was probably a teenager was the best thing for her.
Yeah. And I mean, not only having like all that power, but all those like unrealistic expectation everyone was placing on her must have been difficult. But also, it was all a mask too. Like
Yeah.
that's not who she really was. Like that's who she presented, like how she presented herself to everyone, because she thought that's what she was supposed to do. That's what her dad told her. Um but and there was a lot of projecting on her part, like everything, like she was going through her own thing, like her own trauma of like her mother hating her and her dad dying, and then she was given Yuki to play with her, but then she
Yeah,
said like
like that.
everything is dark and like I'm depressed, so you'll be depressed too. Like it was like,
Yeah, yeah, the fact that she could be given a child as a child, because they don't. I try to do a quick search to see how old she is, but of course, the thing that I'm looking at doesn't have her age, but she can't be more than a few years older than Kyo and Yuki. So
yeah.
it's it's odd, the thought of giving a child another child as like their plaything, and that's just considered okay within the family, and people just went with it.
There were just so many adults that were basically responsible for a lot of the trauma that happened because nobody said anything. And like, once Toru started talking about how she wanted to break the curse,
Mhm.
the I think at one point the adults were like, and us as the adults, we're not even doing anything. We're just going along with it and we accepted this is life. And I'm like, it felt like it should have been like almost the other way around, because they were already like, I don't know what, like 7 to 10 years old when Akito was born. So they kind of had a different existence. Like they weren't as, not to dismiss their own trauma, but they submitted right away to Akito's will, and they were like, this is it, this is life, I guess. This is, and like there was no, well, I guess they also didn't really have anyone else to turn to either, because the adults were like, well, this is a weird secret we have to keep. Like you turn into a different animal, like if somebody of the opposite sex hugs you, so that's already like, and you wouldn't even talk about that, like how traumatizing it is to like not be able to hug your parents,
Yeah,
um or like any of your friends or any family, anything.
yeah, it that would be really odd. Like the one thing that like really choked me up a little bit too was when Hiro, the sheep, when his curse was broken and the first thing he does is go and hugs his baby sister. Like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for it was for him, and then like Yuki also did that. Like when he felt it, he hugged, who then later became his girlfriend,
mhm,
and Kyo hugged Toru.
mhm.
But yeah, it was yeah, it was really sad that just a basic human connection, it was sort of completely eliminated for most of them, because some of them did have like a male figure in their life, I guess, but it wasn't a parent, or
Yeah.
the parent like completely shunned them because they couldn't care less about them. Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine not being able to hug my loved ones. That definitely would be traumatic in and of itself.
One of the things that I kind of find difficult sometimes is being part of the mental health field is that you start noticing like throughout like your studying and experiences, you start noticing all the gray areas that happen. So it's, even though Akito did horrible things, I'm like, but I get it. Like I understand why. Like it not, I'm not saying like it's justified or like it's cool
Mhm.
that you did that. Like it's horrible. Like you should not
Yeah.
have done that. But like I can see why. And like a lot of these people, they sort of took on
Mhm.
whatever they experience is what they portrayed to another person, right? Or like how, what, because they each, in some ways, they had somewhat of a similar trauma where like they were abandoned, whether it was like a death or like they were shunned, but they were abandoned by like the adults in their family. There was a lot of verbal abuse,
Mhm.
for a lot, like bullying adults, kids at school. There's a lot of that.
What I always tell my clients is we can have a reason for behavior, but it's not an excuse. So even though like we can see the reasons for Akito's behavior, it's not an excuse. She's still awful.
No, and I think that's what a lot of her like cousins ended up just viewing it
Mhm.
as well. I can understand, so yeah, I guess, like,
Yeah.
because like I don't know, like Momichi, like I said, he's like one of my favorites, and like so I paid more attention to his story too. And like even though he was like this happy-go-lucky sort of kid who was like always trying to like, be friendly and be happy all the time, there were times where he was really where he was like at the end, where like Akito was waiting outside of the hospital, like not wanting to like go inside and visit Kurano and Toru.
Mhm.
He's like, oh, it's a good thing they're dumb, huh? Because otherwise you will be in jail right now. And I was like, wait a minute, that's so true. Like nobody thought I'm gonna go to the police and get her arrested.
Mhm.
Because oh, at least for Kurano, she stabbed him.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Toru was kind of like more or less an accident, but for Kurano, she like flat out was like,
Yeah, she just
you're
flat
dead
out
now.
stabbed him and left him for dead.
Yeah. And then he was like, and then in the end, he was like, okay, I'm going to leave because then otherwise she's never gonna forgive herself. And I'm like, you're still thinking about her, you're still like catering to her, and that's like not good. And so like I have a dog, and there's this thing going like on TikTok for a while where they're like, yeah, I spoiled my dog. Like, what is the worst thing that can happen if you spoil a pet? Like, it's not like spoiling a kid. It's completely different. And like sometimes like I understand like, wanting to give your child everything that you didn't have growing up, or like wanting them to be safe and all these things, but they also have to have experiences where they fail and get up, like on their own. They can't really have that expectation, because Akito was like, everyone is going to do everything for me,
Mhm.
and I can do whatever I want. And that's not healthy at all for anybody, adults or child. That's not, we are, just as humans, we are all social creatures, so we do depend on others. Like,
Yeah.
we need another person to be there for us. But there has to be a level of independence in certain things, you know.
Yeah, and there has to be a level of self-awareness towards self-correction, because there are times where you're going to do a social faux pas, like that's just how things go in life, and you have to recognize it and then be able to adapt and change. And she never had to adapt and change because all of her social faux pas were just glossed over, ignored, catered to.
Hmm. I thought her, I don't know if it was like this in the manga as well, because I have not read it, but in the anime felt like really like her change was very, very sudden. Like it came out of nowhere because she was like, okay, she did have like a mental breakdown when she stopped Kurano and then like was trying to fight her mom.
Mhm.
And she came to some realizations, but then she did like a 180, like almost overnight. And then I'm like, um, I don't know.
It's been well over a decade since I read the manga, but the anime, to my remembrance, is very, the remake at least is very close to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is that quick. But yeah, I understand. I felt like it was very quick too. I'm glad that at least she didn't go to like the party that they were throwing for Kyo and Toru, because that would have felt a little bit like, okay, you guys are all forgiving this girl way too fast.
Yeah.
So she at least had some knowledge of like, I probably wouldn't be welcome here. I probably still need to do a little bit more repentance before I'm invited to this kind of that kind of party atmosphere.
Well, I appreciated that in the end she was like not necessarily apologize. I mean, I think she should have apologized and be like, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Because if even just saying that, like it wasn't gonna change anything that she did, but it's really healing for both persons. Like for her, it could have been extremely healing, and for the people to hear it that like, hey, I also had things I was struggling with, not an excuse, like you said, but you know, like I'm trying to do better, and like hope you forgive me one day, or whatever. But yeah, it was just a little too fast, her change. I know like throughout, like she started to realize, or like I think when Toru sort of came more into the picture and started meeting a lot of like the other Zodiac members,
Mhm.
she Akito started like having these realizations of like, oh wait a minute, like this person's gonna leave me. But it wasn't like a full awareness of like it's because of my horrible attitude and like everything that I did to them. Like she wasn't quite at that place yet. And
Mhm.
then like after her conversation with Toru, it was kind of like, oh, I suddenly understand everything about myself now. And I'm like, like what did you eat that day? And so I can recommend it to everyone in my life and like all of my
Yeah.
clients, because that it's really hard to get to that point where you like it takes years for you to like realize and like process all these things. And especially when it comes to things that you did, right? Like
Yeah.
if I were to go out and commit a horrible crime, um it's it's a lot harder, I think, to come to this sort of realization and even sort of like self-acceptance of what happened and who I am and what I did, um, than experiencing some sort of loss or trauma. Okay, everyone is different in their own journeys and stuff, but like it doesn't happen overnight. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, and that's not how therapy works either,
Oh,
because
I
a
don't
lot
know.
of
We
people.
haven't tried falling off a cliff in front of our clients. That might be the
True.
solution.
Very true. I don't think I really want to do that. I'll try to continue discovering some sort of magic wand or something, but
Yeah.
uh
The magic
yeah.
wand would be better, but apparently falling off a cliff isn't.
That's the key.
Yeah,
For them to realize other wrongs. Okay.
I'll have to try that next time I'm having a really difficult time with a client. Just fall off a cliff. That'll be my answer. For
On
myself,
accident,
not for
because it
my
can't
client.
be their fault or your fault. It had to be an
Yeah,
accident. So
yeah. They have to be reaching for my hand and then I just fall away.
right. But then you're okay, like completely okay.
Yeah,
No broken
then I'm
bones or
okay.
anything like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, no long-term damage, no.
Yeah, no, none of that. I mean, I did appreciate the fact that they kind of hinted at the fact that Kyo and Toru stayed together
Yeah.
well into, their their aging years. Um but I would have liked to see them like a few more episodes of them just being happy,
Yeah.
after the curse was broken, because he was very much like left to the imagination, and I'm like, no, just give me a little bit more, because they were miserable the whole time, like everyone was, for like one reason or another. um yeah, no, just a little,
Yeah.
or a side story, because I know for, well, it wasn't, I don't know. I watched it like several years ago for like the first time. So like I didn't watch or didn't read it when it was coming out. So I wasn't really part of like the fandom at that time. But I would have liked to see maybe like a novel that came out afterwards. I know there's the movie, right? Where like the prequel. I kind of
Yeah,
started
it's like a
watching it, but
prequel. I think it's about Toru's
like,
parents. Yeah.
yeah, but that relationship was also,
I did not watch it, but I heard there is a big age gap.
yes, because the first time that they met, like the mom and the dad met, he was a teacher at her like middle school,
Oh.
and he was just a student, so he was like, I guess, collecting hours or whatever, but he was still an adult, and she was like early teenager, like 15 or something like that.
Well,
And
middle school.
I didn't finish it, so like I don't know like how old she was when they got together, but there was still like a massive age gap.
Yeah, I don't know what was up with that show and the massive age gaps.
There's like 5 different relationships that I was like, no, that is not okay.
And the cousins, the getting with your cousin. I mean, they don't say like how closely related the members of the family are, but it's interesting how they get you to like root for couples and then you remember that that they are at least somewhat related because they're all part of the Soma family,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um like the ram and tiger and the cow and horse, like they're cousins.
Well, at least at least the little kids, they were like closer in age, and they weren't necessarily in a relationship, like they kind of liked each other. So it was like, it was still very sort of like innocent, I guess.
Yeah, but
But the teenage ones, like the teenage relationship, that was, yeah, there's a lot going on there. This is like
there's so much we could get into this show, but I think we're gonna have to close up here. But maybe we could do a part two, or I would love to have you on for another episode sometime. This is great. Thank you for all of your
my
inspiration.
complaining and my ranting about how this show was so weird. I mean, it is really good because it gets you to think. It
Mhm.
really definitely gets you to think about your own emotions. It
Mhm.
shows you how the emotions can be shown or felt like with different people and how they come about, and there's a lot of reflection going on with all of the characters, like their inner thoughts. It's really amazing. There's a lot of like really shady things that we don't recommend you engage in any of that, but yeah, it's quite interesting, and it definitely is something you can watch and then discuss with someone else.
Yes, let us know
There's
what your
lots.
thoughts were on the trauma and how people expressed it in or characters expressed it in the show. How does that relate to maybe how you express trauma? Let us know in the comment section. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please comment, like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. Remember to be kind to yourselves this week.